JK Rowling astounds ex-users with rare pro-trans post. JK Rowling issues surprising message of support for trans adults.
This is the first crack in the armour I have ever seen on her. She's been untouchable for decades. And now this? Something's up.
The show's numbers must not be hitting as they hoped. The most interesting thing about Rowling's statement is not the statement itself, but that she, or more likely Warner Brothers, felt the need to issue it. Did JK Rowling just row back on her anti-trans crusade? Are cracks starting to show? Is this a sign of external pressures, potentially from home box office or the brothers Warner themselves? Is this a sign that palms are starting to get sweaty over the new TV series, and that JK Rowling is being ordered to soften her stance or else something? Or is this just what bigots do always, all the time, every single day, constantly? Let's discuss. So apparently, JK Rowling, and I am going to assume you know who that is, took to the internet recently to assure us that actually she does support trans people. I happen to know a self-described transsexual woman who's older than I am and wonderful. Although she's open about her past as a gay man, I've always found it hard to think of her as anything other than a woman, and I believe, and certainly hope, she's completely happy to have transitioned. If you could come inside my head and understand what I feel when I read about a trans woman dying at the hands of a violent man, you'd find solidarity and kinship. I want trans women to be safe. Because, of course, trans rights are human rights. And of course, trans lives matter. Oh my god, I wonder what triggered such a turnaround, such a complete and utter change of opinion. Surely this must mean something. She says, wait, oh, hold up, hang on. I read the wrong thing. Um, that was actually from the essay that she wrote 6 years ago. You know, the one which oh yeah, signalled the beginning of her obsessive campaign to remove British trans people of their rights and dignity and access to public space. Apologies. So what did she say recently? Hang on. Ah, okay, I found it. I've always believed that adults with intractable gender dysphoria may only find peace after surgery and taking hormones. Is that it? That's, yeah, yeah, that's it. Okay. Let's discuss. Okay, so first, let's get the obvious thing out of the way. Um, Issuing a statement is a hilarious way to describe replied to a tweet. What is this as exceedingly rare as many articles and people on Blue Sky are describing it? Oh, well, obviously fucking not, as she says herself when she issued this statement in response to a quote tweet. It's only what I've been saying publicly since 2020. So were the cracks starting to show in 2020? Were Warner Brothers pressuring her 6 years ago? Clearly not. Joanne has always said that there are a tiny, teeny handful of trans people who she would be willing to accept, who she would permit to be. So let's dissect what she wrote. Intractable gender dysphoria. So, intractable means something which is not easily solved, cured, or managed. So, by that, she means that transitioning should be the absolute last resort after everything else has failed, including what we would usually call conversion therapy. She specifies adults because she simply does not believe that trans kids exist, contrary to all the evidence. And I can prove it because 100% of trans people were kids. She thinks that most of what we would often call gender dysphoria isn't intractable and can therefore be cured. Notice too how she places the word surgery before the word hormones in that sentence, despite the fact that usually hormones would come before surgery if indeed any surgery takes place. Of course, many trans people will never get surgery either because they don't want to or for a multitude of reasons can't. But of course, to Joanne, surgery is absolutely required. Through all of her talk of not wanting to medicalize people, she insists on surgery as a prerequisite for acceptance as a true and deserving trans person. While at the same time, of course, she wants access to those hormones and surgeries strictly limited to the point where they are practically unavailable to most of the people who need them. And I mean, all of this is just, clear from her public profile and all the words what she keeps saying. In her 2020 essay, she makes a whole big thing about having a trans friend and how she always found it very hard to think of her as anything but a woman. And she was talking about this friend of hers again earlier this year on Twitter after she was asked by someone why she seems to have changed her stance since 2020. Why is it you used to feel trans women were women? In your article in 2020, you referred to your trans friend as she and said you found it hard to think of her as anything other than a woman. Is that no longer the case? Great question. Joanne issued the following statement in response. Nothing's changed. I was being honest about how I feel about an individual trans woman I know. Now, that is quite an unusual statement for her because she usually goes with like trans identified male or something, which shows you what she actually thinks. There are some trans people, like her good friend, and then there are trans identified people, which are like all the other trans people she seems to interact with. Objectively speaking, she has physical characteristics that make it fairly obvious she wasn't born female, but she's a gentle, funny person I've never referred to as anything other than she and her. I find it perfectly easy to reconcile my fond feelings towards her and my experience of her as someone with very female coded energy, with a belief that she hasn't literally changed sex. And incidentally, she doesn't believe she's literally changed sex either. Right, so this is just very much in line with her whole dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who'll have you, live your best life in peace and security. But force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real? Hashtag I stand with Maya. Hashtag this is not a drill. Statement that she issued way back in 2019. She didn't mean it then and she don't mean it now. She can brag about using the correct pronouns for her trans friend, but her entire social media platform is just full of posts of her misgendering and dead naming perfect strangers on the internet. She has absolutely no idea whether any of the people that she's statementing have very female coded energy or not. She's calling them a man regardless. She's calling cis women men for having the wrong balance of hormones, for fuck's sake. She's out there on Twitter issuing statements all the time about how sex is what all about how what kind of game meat your body is potentially capable of producing all but then at the same time, she's declaring that slightly higher levels of testosterone make you a man. I wonder if she thinks that a cis man who has slightly higher levels of estrogen or something is a woman. Except no, I don't, because of course she fucking doesn't. She has no desire or need to be consistent. Is it the hormones? Is it the eggs? Is it the very female coded energy? Which dictates whether or not Joanne will respect your identity and use your actual name and pronouns? Or does none of this really matter to her? In response to her statement about the gentle female energy of her friend, she was asked, If you began referring to your friend as he, do you think she might still feel that you see her as a woman? And if, when you're out in public, you insist that she uses the men's toilets, would that make her feel that you still view her as a woman? Basically, just asking, if you treated your trans friend in the exact same manner that you treat all other trans people who you publicly interact with, how would that make her feel? How did the usually verbose author of fiction respond? I can't tell you what another person would feel in hypothetical circumstances. Now, the fantasy author's lack of imagination aside, those aren't hypothetical circumstances. They are the actual circumstances of all trans people in the UK right now, thanks to laws and policies and a social and political climate which you, Joanne, have directly helped incubate. It is the lived experience of any trans person who you've seen criticise you on Twitter. Like, you honestly just don't know how your friend would feel if you started calling her a man. You couldn't possibly imagine what her reaction might be to such a far-fetched hypothetical. Really. It's funny because I think that if she like opened a Twitter account and then like criticized you and you saw it, you'd be calling her a man in a heartbeat, female energy be damned. And Twitter user responded to this by asking simply, maybe ask her? At which point, presumably, Joanne dropped her phone off the side of the yacht or something because she went kind of quiet. No more statements were issued that day. Not even to all of her followers who were more than happy to misgender her friend in her mentions. That Joanne has repeated the fact that she accepts that maybe a small handful of adults might require gender reassignment does not in any way signal a softening of her stance. She still thinks that those adult trans women ought to stay out of women's spaces, that they haven't changed sex, that they don't deserve protections as women, that it's fine to call them men. And she's only acknowledging that it might make them happier, that they might find peace. Not that she supports them finding that peace. Not that she thinks that society ought to make it easier for trans people to find peace. Not that she agrees with or accepts anything they have to say about their identity. Looking at her feed, I couldn't say that she's facing any significant pressure from studio executives or anyone else. The series is going ahead. Actors seem to be lining up to participate, and if anything, her stance has only hardened since 2020. You know, back in the day, she was talking about like fighting for women's rights as a domestic abuse survivor and like uh, protecting autistic girls who might not understand that you can like blue and also be a girl at the same time. Or like you know, supporting her friends when they got fired from their jobs for being nasty, that kind of thing. These days she's posting upskirted photos of trans women. She's sharing screenshots from quite obviously far-right news sources. If you search her feed of statements for the term trans women, you won't see one where it's not followed by "are men." So when she says that she found it hard to think of her trans friend as anything but a woman, I guess she put the effort in and managed it. Trans women are men. All of them. Trans women aren't women. Trans women are men. Men do not belong in women's single sex spaces. Like, those are just from the past few weeks. She will talk about her trans friend. She will talk about her vague support for certain trans people, because bigots always try to mask their hatred with a guise of respectability and concern. Oh, I don't hate refugees. If you are genuinely fleeing for your life, then of course I think you deserve safety. It's just that most of them aren't in danger and just want to come over here for money and crime. Oh, of course I think disabled people should get to live in dignity. And if you are really, truly disabled, then of course you should get benefits. The problem is, most people on benefits aren't really disabled and are actually just too lazy to work. I'm not misogynistic. I want women to be healthy and happy. I love women. I just think I know what's best for them, and that happens to be making me a sandwich. Look, I'm definitely not Islamophobic. To each their own. I don't hate Muslim people. I have a Muslim friend at work. I just think that Islam is incompatible with Western values and we need to protect our Christian identity. Look, I'm not bigoted. I just want to protect women and girls from men who wish them harm, and the only way to do that is to target entire groups of people, including women and girls, just in case. And that's why I want to talk about this today, because what Joanne said doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But people on the internet acting like it means something does. Because this whole fake concern for the real ones, for the true ones, it shows up everywhere. It shows up constantly in disability related discourses and in policy proposals. Now, there are really autistic people out there, and I'm sure some people do struggle with ADHD, but let's face it, most people who call themselves neurodivergent are either faking for attention or are wrongly pathologizing normal human qualities. Because you see, when people who aren't disabled claim to be disabled, then that hurts disabled people. So, actually, by attacking anyone who claims to be disabled, I'm actually helping disabled people. If you think about it, I care more about disabled people than people who claim to be disabled. So, here's Joanne doing exactly that one. Ade claimed to have been non-verbal until the age of 11. He span a false narrative about being autistic and mute, then learning to speak and write so well he gained a PhD. What harm did he do to parents with children who are genuinely non-verbal by selling them false hope? This was after Jason Arde's death. It refers to the fact that two men who claimed to go to school with him claimed they heard him speak and sing songs, as if to be non speaking necessarily means that you are physically unable to produce sound. It does not mean that. It's like when people simply cannot wrap their heads around ambulatory wheelchair users. Other classmates and adults who knew Jason as a child confirmed his own account of his life. I know of many autistic people who were minimally or non speaking as kids who later went on to do well in academia. I knew one kid who didn't and couldn't speak at school at all, but could talk to his parent. Some classmate claiming to have heard Jason singing on a bus doesn't undermine anything. But Joanne chose to accept these accusations immediately and accused Jason of spinning a false narrative and actively doing harm to the genuinely disabled children out there by selling false hope, as if no non-speaking child could ever do well at school. It's giving.
They'll never write a poem.
You see, by attacking a black autistic man, a man who had just days before taken his own life due to ongoing public attacks by influential figures in the media, by accusing him of lying about his own identity, Joanne is, if you don't think about it, protecting kids by attacking trans people, by accusing them of lying about their own identity. Joanne is, if you don't think about it, protecting kids. Just like all the other bigots who spend their days attacking members of minority groups, Joanne has convinced herself that she is righteous. Of course, she doesn't think that she's hateful. Of course, she thinks she's supportive of her trans friend, if indeed this trans friend exists. Of course, she believes that she is actually supporting the people who she spends every single day attacking. Her self delusion is not a sign that the cracks are showing. It is not an indication that she is facing any significant pressure whatsoever. It's how she's always been, and it's what she's always said. It was only days ago that she offered to cover the legal costs of anyone who wishes to sue the NHS for failing to adequately segregate people. She describes trans women pissing in the women's loos as an assault on legal rights. She's fine to see the National Health Service, a famously underfunded and overstretched public health institution, which is one of the only great things a British government has ever done, get sued, while claiming to care about the vulnerable people who rely on it. A woman who will never, ever, for the rest of her life, need to rely on public healthcare, let alone have to stay on a shared ward. You know she's getting that private room en suite treatment if she ever needs healthcare. Then the lawsuits will keep coming. This is fun for her. We do not, in fact, got to hand it to her or to any of the people or institutions who are currently involved in the making and maintenance of her little wizard-based franchise. And this is not an exceedingly rare statement. But by giving it any kind of credence at all, you are playing directly into her hands. It's the reasonable concerns of those people who are happy to see families drown in the English Channel, or of those people who will go out to set fire to the homes of immigrants. It's the reasonable concerns of those who are currently trying to remove millions of people of their diagnoses, benefits, and access to services, or those people who simply believe the PC has gone mad and so therefore we must scrap all human rights. Like, the only bigots who don't pretend to have reasonable concerns are your full on Nazi types. The ones who feel somehow shielded by anonymity, the ones who we would usually consider to be criminal in their speech and actions, the ones with nothing left to lose. You know, the ones that you typically find leaving supportive messages in response to JK Rowling's statements. You know, the guys. I was actually gonna read out some of the responses that I'd seen to her from her followers, but it's just hate speech and incitement to violence, and I would like to keep my channel. I just think it's interesting though, isn't it? Which users she responds to and blocks, and which ones she just sort of leaves sitting there. I'm just saying, like, if I had the kind of money where I could pay for someone to moderate my comments, I probably would. But if you would like me to have more money, which, full disclosure, I probably won't spend on moderation because my followers are normal, there are ways to achieve that linked in the description below. I've got other videos on JK Rowling, on her quote unquote feminism and her thoughts on autism, as well as all the ableism she wrote into Harry Potter. And there's also videos linked below on her transphobia from trans creators. But can we please stop acting like this means anything? Because it doesn't. They greenlit this series despite her, and they likely see any pushback as just good marketing. The only thing that will put any pressure on them whatsoever is if the viewing numbers are bad. So don't watch it. Don't play the video games. Don't give this woman any more money that she's going to use to sue the fucking NHS.